The Count, an old gentleman of good figure, accentuated by the artifices of his toilet his resemblance to King Henry the Fourth, who, following a glorious legend of the family, had impregnated one of the de Breville ladies, whose husband, for this reason, was made a count and governor of the province. A colleague of Mr. Carré Lamadon in the General Council, Count Hubert represented the Orleans party in the department. The story of his marriage with the daughter of a little captain of a privateer had always remained a mystery, but as the Countess had a grand air, received better than anyone, and passed for having been loved by the son of Louis Philippe, all the nobility did her honor, and her salon remained the first in the country, the only one which preserved the old gallantry, and to which the entrée was difficult. The fortune of the Brevilles amounted, it was said, to 500,000 francs in income, all in good securities. These 6 persons formed the foundation of the carriage company, the society side, serene and strong, honest established people, who had both religion and principles. By a strange chance all the women were upon the same seat, and the Countess had for neighbors 2 sisters who picked at long strings of beads and muttered some paters and aves. One was old and as pitted with smallpox as if she had received a broadside of grape shot full in the face. The other, very sad, had a pretty face, and a disease of the lungs, which, added to their devoted faith, illumined them and made them appear like martyrs. Opposite these 2 devotees were a man and a woman who attracted the notice of all. The man, well known, was Cornudet the Democrat, the terror of respectable people. For 20 years he had soaked his great red beard in the box of all the democratic cafés. He had consumed with his friends and confrères a rather pretty fortune left him by his father, an old confectioner, and he awaited the establishing of the Republic with impatience, that he might have the position he merited by his great expenditures. On the 4th of September, by some joke perhaps, he believed himself elected prefect, but when he went to assume the duties, the clerks of the office were masters of the place and refused to recognize him, obliging him to retreat. Rather a good bachelor on the whole, inoffensive and serviceable, he had busied himself with incomparable ardor in organizing the defense against the Prussians. He had dug holes in all the plains, cut down young trees from the neighboring forests, sown snares over all routes, and, at the approach of the enemy, took himself quickly back to the town. He now thought he could be of more use in Havre, where more entrenchments would be necessary. The woman, one of those called a coquette, was celebrated for her embonpoint, which had given her the nickname of Ball of Fat. Small, round, and fat as lard, with puffy fingers choked at the phalanges like chaplets of short sausages, with a stretched and shining skin, an enormous bosom which shook under her dress, she was, nevertheless, pleasing and sought after, on account of a certain freshness and breeziness of disposition. Her face was a round apple, a peony bud ready to pop into bloom, and inside that opened 2 great black eyes, shaded with thick brows that cast a shadow within, and below a charming mouth, humid for kissing, furnished with shining microscopic baby teeth. She was, it was said, full of admirable qualities. As soon as she was recognized, a whisper went around among the honest women, and the words prostitute and public shame were whispered so loud that she raised her head. Then she threw at her neighbors such a provoking, courageous look that a great silence reigned, and everybody looked down except Luceau, who watched her with an exhilarated air. And immediately conversation began among the three ladies, whom the presence of this girl had suddenly rendered friendly, almost intimate. It seemed to them they should bring their married dignity into union in opposition to that sold without shame. For legal love always takes on a tone of contempt for its free confrere. The three men, also drawn together by an instinct of preservation at the sight of Cornudet, talked money with a certain high tone of disdain for the poor. Count Hubert talked of the havoc which the Prussians had caused, the losses which resulted from being robbed of cattle and from destroyed crops, with the assurance of a great lord, 10 times millionaire, whom these ravages would scarcely cramp for a year. Mr. Carré-Lamadon, largely experienced in the cotton industry, had had need of sending 600,000 francs to England as a trifle in reserve if it should be needed. As for Luceau, he had arranged with the French administration to sell them all the wines that remained in his cellars, on account of which the state owed him a formidable sum which he counted on collecting at Havre. And all three threw toward each other swift and amicable glances. Although in different conditions, they felt themselves to be brothers through money, that grand freemasonry of those who possess it, and make the gold rattle by putting their hands in their trousers pockets. The carriage went so slowly that at 10 o'clock in the morning they had not gone 4 leagues. The men had got down 3 times to climb hills on foot. They began to be disturbed because they should be now taking breakfast at Totes, and they despaired now of reaching there before night. Each one had begun to watch for an inn along the route, when the carriage foundered in a snowdrift, and it took 2 hours to extricate it. Growing appetites troubled their minds, and no eating-house, no wine-shop showed itself, the approach of the Prussians and the passage of the troops having frightened away all these industries. The gentlemen ran to the farms along the way for provisions, but they did not even find bread, for the defiant peasant had concealed his stores for fear of being pillaged by the soldiers who, having nothing to put between their teeth, took by force whatever they discovered. Toward 1 o'clock in the afternoon, Luceau announced that there was a decided hollow in his stomach. Everybody suffered with him, and the violent need of eating, ever increasing, had killed conversation. From time to time someone yawned, another immediately imitated him, and each in his turn, in accordance with his character, his knowledge of life, and his social position, opened his mouth with carelessness or modesty, placing his hand quickly before the yawning hole from whence issued a vapor. Ball of Fat, after many attempts, bent down as if seeking something under her skirts. She hesitated a second, looked at her neighbors, then sat up again tranquilly. The faces were pale and drawn. Luceau affirmed that he would give 1,000 francs for a small ham. His wife made a gesture as if in protest, but she kept quiet. She was always troubled when anyone spoke of squandering money, and could not comprehend any pleasantry on the subject. "The fact is," said the Count, "I cannot understand why I did not think to bring some provisions with me." Each reproached himself in the same way. However, Cornudet had a flask full of rum. He offered it. It was refused coldly. Luceau alone accepted 2 swallows, and then passed back the flask, saying, by way of thanks, "It is good all the same. It is warming, and checks the appetite." The alcohol put him in good humor, and he proposed that they do as they did on the little ship in the song, eat the fattest of the passengers.